get help, because it's not going to get any better. It is not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. And there is nothing shameful about asking for help, because, well, like I did, I'm not going to lie, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was angry that I was even at that call, because like I said, I wasn't supposed to be. Like, meaning that was very odd for the chief to make that call, that he would have somebody of my rank out on the road, right? It just doesn't happen.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
Welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I'm pleased to be joined today by Kim Ledgerwood. Kim is a Canadian resident who's had an over 30-year career in law enforcement until a traumatic experience on the job threw her into active addiction that quickly spiraled out of control. Now a successful business owner, Kim shares her story about her recovery and the impact that trauma can have on your addiction. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I am so glad to have you on. When we chatted on the phone, we really had a great conversation about the role that trauma plays in addiction. And I want to talk with you about your story. And you have such an interesting story. It's not like a story you hear every day, right? And I'd like to say, where did this all start? I know you had a traumatic experience that kind of kicked off addiction for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So I was in my 29th year of my policing career, and I had been positioned in a spot that I'd put myself in, meaning I did not think that I would be exposed to anything more that could harm me in the ways of things that you see over the years in your policing career. But that summer, there had been an order from the chief because there had been a lot of gun violence in the city, and my position, my rank was required to be out with my platoon on a particular night of the summer of 2018. So for that weekend, it was the last night working. It was we were working a 4 p.m. to a 4 a.m. shift. So it was about 10 o'clock. I was in my police car when a citywide assist call came over the radio. And it was probably one of the most critical incidents that has hit the city of Toronto ever. So that was one of the calls that my team was called out to, and we went to it. And let's say that it was kind of the straw that broke my back, whereas I thought perhaps I was out of harm's way at this point, having so many years in and only, looking forward to a retirement, healthy. And then, that took me by surprise. I thought that after that night when I had gone home that I was okay, but I wasn't okay. And it happened to be on the last night when there was, we had 5 days off, and then you go back in for another shift, being a shift worker. So during those 5 days off, I proceeded to, drink a lot, more than, and not realizing really why, but it just made me feel better, and I didn't have to think about what had happened 5 days prior to that. And then it was time to go back to work, and I went back to work, but then for the next 3 months I knew I wasn't right. I knew my addiction was going through the roof. It was like I couldn't stop. I was going to work. Some would argue that I was a functioning, drinker, but really there is no such thing.
Kim, looking back, obviously, and I want to make, people that are listening to this are saying, wow, all of a sudden a traumatic experience can, cause an addiction issue for you. But that's not really how that works, right? So you kind of had addiction kind of going in the background, but it was more manageable. Then the traumatic experience kind of pole vaulted it, if you will, into something that was a little bit more serious.
Yes, absolutely. Um, I didn't think I had a problem before with addictions, um, because I thought I had everything under control. But when this incident happened, it didn't take long for me to realize I didn't have anything in control and that I was just kidding myself.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine. Did you feel that it kind of took you by surprise? Because I think a lot of people that are fighting addiction issues, especially in high stress careers, and being a police officer, I don't think there's anything more high stress than that. A lot of the things are life and death. You probably deal with just a general overall anxiety and stress anyway when you're on the job. And then, I think a lot of people feel, well, hey, you know what? I'm going to drink a little bit. I'll have a little good time. It's going to reduce the stress. And then soon find out that it's kind of spiraling out of control after you hit this traumatic experience. What were some of the signs that you saw when things went from manageable to unmanageable? What were the things that you noticed?
Well, I was a social person, and then I started to isolate. I was accepting invitations. I was even going as far as to buy tickets. And then I knew in my mind, though, I was going to cancel within an hour of the same night so I wouldn't have to deal with people questioning me as to why I wasn't going to this or going to that. I also uh, didn't go out anymore. I didn't want to associate with people. I started cutting off people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I just would have no motivation. If it was my days off, I would just sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day and drink, and it would roll into another day. And every day I would say, I'm not going to do this tomorrow. And every day
Mm-hmm.
that I woke up in the morning, I'd say, I'm not going to do this today. And I couldn't stop. And I did
Do you
it.
think it's easier? Do you think it's easier, especially as a police officer, to say, you know, okay, I get maybe I'm suffering from this dramatic thing that happened to me. Maybe I am suffering from trauma, but maybe it's just trauma and it's not alcoholism, right? It's not addiction. Maybe it's just the trauma, right? Did you find that to be a battle? Because I know other people that I've spoke with that have had traumatic experiences that had already kind of they were set up already kind of in addiction, but it was manageable, let's say, right? And then the traumatic episode happens. They spend most of their time kind of going back and forth saying, well, if this traumatic experience didn't happen, then I probably wouldn't have any problems at all
Yeah.
with alcohol.
What that is denial.
Yeah.
That's a convenient excuse, and that's why we don't get help, because we're the answer givers, we're the caretakers. As being police officers, we're very good at taking care of other people and telling them what they should be doing or how to take care of themselves. But then when you turn the tables on us, it doesn't work so well. Even though that sounds ridiculous, it's I wouldn't call it a pride thing. It's more of a it was a, I started with the police service so young that it was what I was taught. Really, I wasn't.
Mhm.
I was taught to not show emotion, to not cry, to after a hard day of work, we would all go out for a drink. Like, and so then you learn that that's how you dealt with these things that happened during the day that you saw, and then we all would share what we saw to each other, because you would never say that to your family when you went home. They don't want to hear about this stuff. So who do you get to talk to? You talk to your fellow officers. And God forbid you would make an appointment with a psychologist or a therapist. Like, wow, if you did that back in the day, they wouldn't. It's more acceptable today. I would say we've come a long
Mhm.
way in society in general, in the acknowledgement field of mental health, of realizing that people mental health is just as important as physical health. And there is a lot of mental health issues out there, ranging from like a whole bunch of, one end to the other.
Yeah.
And addictions goes hand in hand with many of them. Addictions is almost like a separate entity as well, you know?
Yeah, I know, Kim, that the friends that I have that are in law enforcement that are in recovery, tell me that addiction runs rampant in most of the police department divisions. Right, there's a large amount that the focus is over the years has been getting better and better and better.
Mhm.
That's gradually progressing, but that so much of that job is about control, that being able to be in control of yourself, being able to be in control in really honest, bad situations that would make anyone nervous, like life threatening situations. That level of control, it's very, very hard after you've been practicing that for years and years and years of being the person who is in emotional control, to then say, hey, I have no control with addiction. I'm out of control with addiction, right? It kind of runs, it's opposite to the whole messaging that is prevalent in law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. We are, like I said, we're the caretakers. So in order for us to admit, it's almost like admitting defeat. You've been beaten.
Yeah.
You need help, and that isn't something that officers do easily, and it wasn't something that I would have admitted to either until I hit rock bottom, and there wasn't there. I knew that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was going to die.
Yeah.
That,
So how did you get out of this? Because most of the people that I have spoken with that have been in law enforcement, that have had trauma, that have had to also deal with addiction simultaneously, it was a very, very hard road, because culturally, on one side, you don't really want to say anything, because then you're stereotyped basically as somebody who has problems, right? And is not in control. But then at the same time, you obviously need help. How did you find that balance, and how did you start to kind of, how did you start to get onto the road of recovery?
well, not easily. I fought it. After it took actually 4 months. It was 3 months after the incident, whereas I was going to go for a promotion at work, and I had done everything up until that point, just prior to line myself up for that. I had gone
Mm.
back to school. I had just finished my master's. Like it was everything was perfect. And then when the timing, and I was so this was that was July when the incident happened. When I had to put in my application, it was probably October, and I couldn't do it. After all that time, after years of this is what my goal was, I just had to fill out an application. I didn't even have to do anything much that day. I couldn't do it because I couldn't even fathom going through that process. And I knew
Mm.
what, because I already knew I wasn't right, but I hadn't taken it anywhere, And then that moment was like, whoa, what's wrong with me? This isn't like me. I'm the overachiever. I'm the one who never quits. I don't stop for anything. But it was like I was like I knew, and I didn't want to challenge myself mentally because I felt like I couldn't take that on right then. So I think it was a few days later. I'm at work, and I knew that I had taken off some sick time between then and at this point, and I had just taken regular sick. I
Mhm.
had just taken
Mhm.
regular sick, but I knew it was related to the incident. And part of another hat that I wore when I was at work was on the critical incident response team, which means my job was to be called out when I was on call to critical incidents and make sure that officers were okay and that they had the information they needed in order to follow up with a doctor or so forth, right? Like I knew where I could get help, but I didn't. So
Yeah.
I took my own advice and said, Kim, you have to lead by example, and you need to make it aware that that time you took off sick was a direct relation to what happened to you prior in July. And when I did
Mm.
that, that raised red flags because otherwise nobody knew. And then it was asked to me if I had seen a doctor yet, and I hadn't, and I booked it, and I had to wait. So I got in to see my doctor in December, and within 15 minutes, she told me I was not going to work again, not forever, but to me, I mean, I was not expecting that. I'd never not worked since I was 13. It was that alone was a complete emotional shock to me. Because again, then you feel like you're a failure. You feel
Mhm.
like your whole world is crashing down because I took a step forward to get help. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
So everything that I put in my mind of this is going to happen if I do this, is going to happen if I do this, was coming true, you know? So at the time I thought it was the worst thing that was ever happening in my life.
It almost seems like the way they presented it to you, it was a punishment almost. Okay, thanks for being honest. You've had trauma, you've got these issues. Guess what? You're not going to work.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly, right? And then it makes you think, well, yeah, I shouldn't have said anything because my life would just be the same that it was and I could go to work and, life wouldn't be upside down, but I did. And so it had already
Mhm.
started. The wheels were already in motion. I didn't have a choice and this is what was going to happen. And then so I wasn't working at all. And I was living by myself. My daughters were off to university and college. So guess what I did even more?
Mhm.
My addiction because I had the money, I had the means, I had the time, you know? And I think a month went by and it's progressively getting worse, right? And of course, now I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to go anywhere except to go to the doctors or go to the addiction clinic. But as soon as I would leave there, I hit the liquor store on the way home.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do, right? I only had to see them once a week until I was sitting on my couch and I realized that um, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to die here. I'm going to die here on the couch. And my father was an alcoholic and he died from his alcoholism when I was 12.
Mhm.
And I resented him for it. And that wasn't my reasoning for, saying enough. But now that I look back, I don't resent him anymore. I've over the last 2 years now, I've realized that what he had was a disease, and he couldn't stop. He said he wanted to stop. He didn't. I always thought he chose the bottle over my mom and I, but he didn't. It was a disease, and I realized that when my daughter said to me, "Mom, why can't you just stop?" And I said, "Because I can't. If I could, I would." So
Yeah,
at my very next appointment,
education. It's strange. Look, probably looking back, when you talk to people who do not have addiction problems or have never gone through an addiction problem, they say, well, it seems pretty obvious. Kim, your dad was an alcoholic. You're drinking. You've had this traumatic experience. Things are spiraling out of control. Do you think it possibly could be this? But obviously, like everybody with active addiction, you don't see that.
no,
You don't really see
not at
that,
all.
right? You see other things.
Yeah. Um, But I mean, I saw enough that the next time I saw her, so it was about a month after me being off work, and I brought it up to her, my doctor, and I said, "Okay, I need help, and I need to be locked up."
Hmm.
Basically, I said, "I need to go to a rehab. My choice, my decision. She didn't suggest it. Nobody forced me. I chose to do that, and the reason was because I had no control over myself. I needed rules, I needed structure, I needed P tests, I needed accountability, and I needed rules because I left to my own devices, I could do anything I wanted. I couldn't even see how you could have a fighting chance when you're by yourself and you live by yourself and you have addictions because that's the whole point. You can't do it by yourself, you
Hmm.
know? And that's what I did. And I went into a rehab, and I stayed. I was there for an 8-week program that had. It was for addictions medicine plus um, trauma. And then after 8 weeks was over, I thought because they had many different programs happening there, I thought, you know what, I'm here, and I have cumulative PTSD. And I think I should stay and take that program and try and do more. So I had my last drink was May 13th, 2018. So I'll be 2 years sober this May. So that worked. Did you know there's only a 20% success rate from rehab? So, like, I mean, and it doesn't, I mean, I'm so very happy and proud of myself that I've maintained that, especially through COVID,
Absolutely.
you know?
That's an amazing accomplishment. I mean, I was going to, going back to the trauma, they're finding now through a lot of different studies that people with addiction have had past trauma, right? Either as a child, right? It could be a death in the family, it could be a traumatic experience happened to a child, or even as an adult that actually triggers trauma. Looking back, having been, having recovered from both, right? Alcoholism and addiction issues and trauma, being in active recovery, how are they similar? How is there a similar thinking pattern behind trauma and addiction?
Um, well, that's a hard one. Well, addiction, you can't stop the habit, whatever it is. But I mean, trauma will, I mean, definitely led to my addictions. There was a
Mm-hmm.
definite correlation between the two of them. I don't know that everybody that experiences trauma it will lead to addiction, but I think this the stats would point to it's very
Yeah.
high. Um, for me, like you mentioned, childhood trauma. I definitely did have childhood trauma. I did before I even started on the police service. But before you get hired, they interview you. You do these things. You do tests, psychological tests, so that they can weed out people who might have potential problems down the road. But the problem with that is you could have a perfectly healthy person going into this job, and it could take 2 minutes on the job, and they could experience something that has set them off. Like everybody's threshold when it comes to trauma and how they react to it is different. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the exposure that you've had before that. I'm not saying that I didn't feel anxiety and trauma at work because I'd already experienced it before the job. You
Mm-hmm.
know, what happened with me is, yeah, you experience it again and again and again, basically since I was 19 years old. Like it's been more than half of my life has been, besides your holidays you get from work, has been like, you can imagine how many times do you think that people are happy to see the police? Like
Yeah.
we get called into awful situations for everybody involved. We are
Yeah.
still people. We're
Yeah.
not robots, but we're trained to be robots. And
Yeah.
you know
You're in a really hard position. Do you think now, now that you have, now that you're in active recovery and you're doing the thing, and I'd like to also talk about how your life has changed. It's been amazing. Your amazing success. Do you look at, you probably had dealt with people who were in active addiction all throughout your policing career, right? Do you look at them different now? Do you look at people different now?
well, I could tell you that when I honestly, like me, it's hidden very well, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
as a supervisor, if I knew for a fact somebody was in active addictions, I have an obligation to intervene and try and help them.
Yeah.
Um, I can say, just like me, I'll guarantee you, no, well, nobody, why would I be in the position that I was of authority if anybody suspected that I was suffering the way that I was? They
Mm.
would not have promoted me. And why? Because we're all very good actors and actresses, because
Yeah.
everybody protects themselves and their well-being, you know? Um,
So what's your life like now? I mean, you have really reinvented your life. You
mm,
really did a 180, right? You're no longer a police officer. You're out of that. You have a successful business. Tell us a little bit about what recovery's been like for you.
well, like I said, it hasn't been easy. The hardest part was when I first got out of rehab. That was very difficult because you now you're not under the umbrella and you don't have Big Brother watching over you. You're basically on your own again, right? I was put
Mhm.
exactly in the same spot that I was 4 months prior to going in. The only now was that I had 4 months of sobriety under my belt, um, but I still could do anything I really wanted to. I could break that. So that was difficult, but I kept it. I did it.
Mhm.
Not without having to say no to a lot of invitations, because I did not want to put myself in a position I didn't feel strong enough yet. I didn't feel strong enough that if somebody went, "Here, would you like a drink?" that I would be able to say no. So as a result, I chose my sobriety, and I would stay home and not go. But as time went, on and I felt better, I felt more comfortable. One of the biggest things was going out. Like, I didn't realize how much alcohol plays a part in everyday life. Like, you can't even go out to eat dinner or lunch, and now some breakfast places, without the first thing that the waitress says to you is, "Can I get you a drink? Here's the drink menu." Or it's already on the table, or it's on a big chalkboard when you walk into the place, "Hey, I just wanted chicken wings. I don't need beer with it." Like, but there was a time when, oh my god, I wouldn't have it one without the other, and you just learn these patterns. And then it's funny, since then my circle of friends have changed. Now the people I hang out with are they don't drink, they're sober. And the people that I did hang out with, they feel the need to apologize when they're drinking in front of me. And what I've been told is, they're not sorry they're drinking. They just feel now they have to account for the amount that they're drinking when they're with me. Like, you know what I mean? Because they realize that, you drink a little too much, whereas when I was a drinker, there was no too much. Like,
Mhm.
we all drank too much together and nobody judged anybody. And that's how it was. And that's how you feel good about yourself, and you don't think that you're an alcoholic or you have a problem, you know? Um,
Kim, what advice would you give to somebody who is out there that maybe has realized that they're suffering from trauma and also suffering from addiction?
get help, because it's not going to get any better. It is not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. And there is nothing shameful about asking for help, because, well, like I did, and I did, I'm not going to lie, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was angry that I was even at that call, because, like I said, I wasn't supposed to be. Like, meaning, I like that was very odd for the chief to make that call, that he would have somebody of my rank out on the road, right? It just doesn't happen. But I do also believe that it was meant to happen, because had I not have that happen and I just finished my career out, I wouldn't have dealt with anything of what I've dealt with in the last 2 years during, all of my help that I've been getting. And I'm a better person mentally. I'm a better person physically. I'm a better person, like, as a person.
Mhm.
I can cry tears now, like crocodile tears. I have empathy again. I have feeling. I love people. I want to be around them again. I want to talk to them. I want to help them. I want to learn. Like, the reason I was a police officer is because I wanted to help people. Like, I've
Yeah.
done service for the last 30 years. So now in my retirement, I'm continuing it, except now when I go knock on somebody's door, they're not like, it's damn cops again, right? They're like, "Hi, I'm so glad to see you. Come in," and I don't have to watch my back that somebody's going to try and jump on it and hurt me. Like, I'm so happy now, right? And sobriety, there was a time when I thought you couldn't live. Like, how can sober people live? I don't understand. I thought life's no fun without alcohol. Well, now I'm like, man, wasn't that sad? Like, how can people how can people just depend on alcohol all day? Like, I've done a complete
Mhm.
turnaround to where now, when I feel that, if everybody has it, you have that icky feeling. You have, like, whatever, you have a fight with your mom or your wife or your kid. It's an unsettled feeling. Well, the first thing that would ever come to me with an unsettled feeling is, I need a drink. I need a drink. Now I don't do that. Now I sit in that uncomfortable feeling, and I use the tools that I learned to deal with that uncomfortable feeling. And you know what? it goes away. It goes away. And I'm healthy on the other end of that 10 minutes that it took to go away, but I never let it go away before because I didn't know the tools. I was never taught.
So, Kim, where can they find out more about you?
Well, they can go to my website for my business, which is www.crazywatergirls.com, all one word. And you'll get links from there and you'll find out all about me.
Thanks so much, Kim. Thanks so much for coming on the Recovered Life Show.
Thank you.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.